Hey everyone, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures on Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Professor Bob Long. If you've been following my videos, you know that they are set up for students who are enrolled at Del Mar College in my courses. But anyone out in YouTube land that finds them helpful, please by all means watch them, like them, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be updating a lot of these videos. Many of them were done very quickly in a very extreme time crunch when we went to the COVID break, as I like to call it. It was spring break that ended up being COVID forever. And now that we're back, I'm letting these videos ride because many people have commented to me and emailed me and messaged me, and my students appreciate the fact that they can go back and watch these if they ever miss a lab or just need help understanding this stuff. So the more you guys like it and subscribe, the better off it is for me, and the more I'll be able to do some videos in the future. What we're going to be running through now is development. We're going to finish up sort of some of the female reproductive system, and I'm going to be going a little bit out of order. For those of you who are in my class, we follow a little list of things to know, which is sort of a document that tells us all the structures on each model that you're responsible for. We're going to be doing what are called the pregnant uterus models. So this is a model of the uterus, but it's a pregnant uterus. We have an implanted and developing embryo here. I'm going to go over some of the anatomy of this. This first model, all of the anatomy that you see here is absolutely nothing new except for with two or three minor additions. Most of this is the female anatomy. Now on these models, as a matter of fact, let me grab one. Give me 1 second. And I actually don't have one inside this classroom. So nonetheless, they're sitting on this wooden base, and the model is actually bent. This would actually be anterior where the fundus of the uterus is, and this is the uterus. The vagina, you can see the cervix of the uterus, it's bent downward, and even part of the vagina and the vaginal canal are down here. On this model, you can see the layers of the uterus that I've already covered in my classes. This white lining here would be called the perimetrium. The thick muscle layer would be the myometrium, and then this layer here would typically be called the endometrium. Okay. This is called the broad ligament here, extending out from the uterus. You see the fundus and cervix again. This would be called the fallopian tube or uterine tube. It sort of flares out is the word I'm looking for. And we see the fimbriae, which are the finger-like extensions here. There's an ovary down here and an ovarian ligament. None of that anatomy is new. The only thing that you can see here is this. When the embryo implants, there's a structure that attaches here that we call the chorion. The chorion will actually embed or implant into the endometrium, and so the blood that is in the endometrium will leach nutrients through the chorion and feed the developing embryo. Remember, it doesn't have a chance to get nutrition. There's no mouth, there's no digestive tract, there's no circulatory system. So through all sorts of transport mechanisms, all the nutrients, glucose, fatty acids, glycerol, amino acids, the components of nucleotides, and oxygen are all absorbed from the endometrial lining until the embryo and the regions that have differentiated. One area will become the chorion, and the chorion is what actually implants. It develops blood vessels, becomes the placenta. Now, during development, as long as we can see the uterine cavity, which is this empty space here, then there's three different things called decidua. Now, the decidua is roots. One of those structures is called the decidua basalis. Another one is called the decidua capsularis. And a third one is called the decidua parietalis. So let me grab something. I forgot to take my markers out. I obviously didn't prepare too well for this, but nonetheless, some of the structures that we can see here. And if you see me reach over every now and then, I have to hit the mouse so that the picture doesn't go down when our screen relaxes on us. So this little area, you can see where the endometrium has fused with what we would have called the chorion. This little area right here would be called the decidua basalis. The decidua basalis will eventually become what we call the placenta. But it's not called that as long as we can see the uterine cavity has space in it. Now the rest of this membrane here, the brown that wraps all the way around the embryo or encapsulates it, would be called the decidua capsularis. And finally, this little layer of tissue that just lines the inside of the endometrium all the way around here would be called the decidua parietalis. Parietal meaning outer wall, like the perimeter. So eventually, as the embryo here grows larger, the decidua capsularis will also grow out and eventually fuse with the decidua parietalis, and that's when they form one of the extraembryonic membranes and eventually becomes the amnion. So this model shows us about the first month of development. We're going to go to month 2, and you're going to see the exact same structures. The only difference is the embryo gets a little bigger. So when it comes to our pregnant uterus models, the ones that we have in our labs, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 8 models. They're all the exact same stuff. There's nothing changes other than the embryo gets bigger and becomes a fetus after the 3rd month, and the decidua capsularis fuses to the decidua parietalis and becomes the amnion, and then this decidua basalis becomes what we would call the placenta. So let me show you that as I skip through the models. So the second pregnant uterus model has the exact same stuff. Let me manipulate the image and erase my writing here. We would have the vagina and the vagina down here with the cervix. We see peri, myo, and endometrium. We have the fallopian tube and the fimbriae. Notice they have completely retracted away from the ovary. So if by chance ovulation did occur, and it should not based on the hormonal changes, it would have a hard time making it into the fallopian tube. So the ovarian ligament is here. You can see as the uterus enlarges with the developing embryo, we're going to get the broad ligament becomes kind of taken up or smaller. You still have the decidua basalis, the decidua capsularis, and the decidua parietalis. Okay? And then finally, when we get to the 3rd month, is about when the embryo has reached fetal stage and is so large that we no longer see a cavity inside the uterus. It's all the space has been taken up. So here we see the fetus. This is the umbilical cord. This would be our placenta, and the white membrane would be the amnion or amniotic membrane. When a female breaks her water, it's actually the amniotic membrane that ruptures, and it's amniotic fluid that leaks out. Otherwise, we still have the cervix, we still have the peri, myo, and endometrium. The broad ligament is almost completely gone. The ovaries, the fimbriae. You can see how the uterus becomes enlarged. But all of the anatomy is exactly the same from here on out. So if I go to the next one, it's the same stuff. Now we see the embryo, or the fetus is rather enlarged, has grown a lot, and is starting to move around, and they can tumble around. Apparently this one's going to be male. We see a penis. Here is the cervix and the vagina, the peri, myo, and endometrium, the amnion or amniotic membrane, and the placenta. The broad ligament's gone, the fallopian tubes and everything is kind of being pushed out. And again, nothing changes from this model to the next. Everything remains the same. All we have is the fetus is moving around, and this would be the umbilical cord. You can see it here, which would be attached to mom, and the umbilical arteries and veins of the umbilical cord would attach to the maternal arteries and veins, and whatever mom is eating is what is nourishing the growing fetus. And we continue to go through the models. Eventually, the same thing, just kind of twisting around. Nothing new anatomically speaking. This one shows twins, but everything else is the same. Amnion, the cervix, peri, myo, and endometrium, placenta up at the top. Here's the placenta and the amniotic membrane. So again, you see pretty much nothing new. Near the end of pregnancy, the fetus should be head down so that as it exits, it comes out the cervix of the uterus through the cervical os and the vagina, head down. That would prevent a limb or something from getting caught. If the baby is in a different position, it's called a breech birth. And in some instances, doctors will reach in and try to orient the baby head down so that it makes it easier to get out. If not, they can become stuck, and it could threaten the life of the baby. Nowadays, very often, they'll just do a C-section. They make an incision through the abdominal wall and into the wall of the uterus, pull the baby out, and all the afterbirth, the amnion, and all those membranes. So this is what the placenta would look like. This is the maternal surface. It's attached to the wall of the uterus, and you can see all the arteries and veins. This is the fetal surface. Now, one of the things we have to remember about arteries and veins is typically arteries are red, veins are blue. Arteries carry oxygenated blood, so they glow bright red as oxygen binds to hemoglobin. Veins are more of a bluish green or cyanin color, cyanosis. That would be the color of the veins in your body. The only difference, the only exceptions are for the pulmonary arteries and veins. Arteries are red, veins are blue, except for the pulmonaries. And now we're going to see, except for the umbilicals. So the fetal surface of the placenta is here, and because this blood vessel would come in through what eventually becomes the round ligament of the liver and brings blood towards the heart, this is actually a vein, and as blood leaves the heart to go get clean through mom's urinary system, that would be the umbilical artery. So the umbilical vein is red, the umbilical artery is blue. Arteries are red, veins are blue, except for the pulmonaries and the fetal umbilicals. Anyway, I thought that would be kind of cool to show you. And now we're off to slides, and I'll discuss the slides at a later time. So I hope that was somewhat informative to you. We're going to have one more video in our series, and it's going to be the video of development leading up to implantation. I know I did them out of order, but I like to show that because we just completed the female anatomy, and all the anatomical structures are visible on the pregnant uterus models. The only thing we see different is the developing embryo and then fetus, and we see the decidua, which eventually becomes the placenta and the amnion. So I hope you had as much fun as I did. I hope you learned something. I hope this video was good for you. And if it was helpful, hit like, and I hope to see you in future videos. There's another one coming up. Thank you very much.